The colony ship Perseverance drifted through the darkness between stars, carrying 50,000 sleeping humans toward a new home. Captain Sarah Chun sat in the command chair, watching the star maps with tired eyes. They had been traveling for 3 years, and finally found a system that looked perfect. 3 planets in the habitable zone, plenty of water, and no signs of intelligent life. She didn't know they had crossed into someone else's territory. The alarm started screaming at 0400 hours. Chun jerked awake in her chair as her navigator shouted that 15 massive ships had just appeared around them. They were huge, each one 10 times the size of the Perseverance. Their hulls were dark and covered in sharp angles that looked like insect shells. Weapons ports glowed with an angry red light. Chun ordered her crew to send a friendly greeting on all frequencies. She explained they were peaceful explorers looking for a new home. She apologized for any intrusion and offered to leave immediately. Her hand shook as she recorded the message, but she kept her voice steady. The alien ships didn't respond with words. They responded with a tractor beam that locked the Perseverance in place like an insect in amber. Then a voice came through, speaking perfect English with a clicking, buzzing undertone that made Chun's skin crawl. Inferior species. You have violated Calthurian space. This is an unforgivable crime. Your ship will be destroyed as an example. Your homeworld will be given one choice: complete surrender or total extinction. Chun tried to negotiate. She tried to reason. She tried to beg. The Calthurian commander, who identified himself as Zekthral, listened to her pleas with what sounded like amusement. Then he cut the communication and gave the order to fire. The plasma weapons hit the Perseverance from all sides. The colony ship's shields, designed to block radiation and micrometeorites, lasted less than 3 seconds. The hull melted. The engines exploded. 50,000 people died in their sleep, never knowing what killed them. Captain Sarah Chun had just enough time to trigger the emergency beacon before the bridge collapsed around her. Her last thought was of Earth, and how she had failed to bring her people home. The Calthurians broadcast the destruction across every human frequency they could find. They made sure Earth saw every second of the Perseverance burning. Then they sent their message. Humanity had 30 days to surrender every colony, every ship, every weapon. If they refused, the Calthurian Empire would erase them from the galaxy like they had erased 47 other species before. On Earth, the United Council met in emergency session. Representatives from every nation argued and shouted and tried to find a solution that didn't exist. The Calthurian Empire controlled 47 star systems. They had been conquering worlds for 3,000 years. Humanity had barely left their own solar system. The math was simple and terrible. Most of the council wanted to surrender immediately. Some wanted to run, to scatter into deep space and hope the Calthurians would forget about them. A few wanted to fight, but even they admitted it was suicide. Admiral Marcus Rivera sat in the back of the chamber and said nothing. He watched the footage of the Perseverance dying again and again on his tablet. His daughter had been on that ship. Lieutenant Amy Rivera, 26 years old, excited to help build a new world. She had sent him a message before going into cryosleep, telling him she loved him and would see him in a few years. Now she was atoms scattered across space, killed to make a point to people she had never met. When the council finally asked for his opinion, Rivera stood up slowly. He was a tall man with gray hair and dark eyes that had seen too many battles. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion and the Titan blockade. He had lost ships and crew before. But this was different. This was murder dressed up as justice. I request permission to take my fleet into Calthurian space, he said quietly. The council members stared at him like he had gone insane. The Secretary General asked what he possibly hoped to accomplish. The Calthurians had hundreds of ships. Rivera commanded exactly 47 vessels, the 3rd Expeditionary Group, that was supposed to be exploring the outer colonies. Rivera looked at the screen showing the burning wreckage of the Perseverance. "I'm going to deliver our response in person," he said. "I'm going to make sure they understand that humanity doesn't surrender. Not now. Not ever." The Secretary General told him he would be committing suicide and taking 10,000 crew members with him. Rivera nodded. He knew the odds. But he also knew that if humanity surrendered now, they would be slaves forever. If they ran, they would be hunted down eventually. The only choice left was to show the Caltharians that some species would rather die fighting than live on their knees. The council voted against his plan. Officially, his mission was denied. But after the meeting, 12 council members pulled him aside privately. They told him that if his fleet happened to have a malfunction with their communications equipment, and if they happened to end up in Caltharian space by accident, well, these things happen in wartime. Rivera gathered his captains and told them the truth. This was a volunteer mission. Anyone who wanted to stay behind could do so with no judgment. They would probably all die. They would definitely never be coming home. But they would make the Caltharians regret what they had done. Not a single captain left. Some had lost family on the Perseverance. Others had family on Earth who would become slaves if they surrendered. All of them understood that sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when you know you'll lose. 3 days later, 47 human ships jumped into Caltharian space. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and outmatched in every way that mattered. But Admiral Marcus Rivera had something the Caltharians didn't understand. Nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The hunt was about to begin. Admiral Rivera's fleet entered Caltharian space like ghosts. They used the experimental jump drives that humanity had only recently developed, technology that let them appear and disappear without warning. The Caltharians had never seen anything like it. Their own ships were faster and more powerful, but they moved in predictable patterns, following ancient protocols that had worked for 3,000 years. Rivera didn't follow any protocols. He didn't fight fair. The first target was a supply station orbiting a gas giant in the Keth system. It was lightly defended, just 3 patrol ships and a handful of automated defenses. Rivera's ships jumped in, launched every missile they had, then jumped out before the Caltharians could respond. The station exploded, taking with it enough fuel and ammunition to supply an entire armada for a month. The second target was a communication relay near the border. Rivera sent his fastest ships, destroyers that could barely hurt a real warship, but were perfect for hit-and-run attacks. They reduced the relay to scrap metal and disappeared into the darkness. The third target was a mining operation on an asteroid. The fourth was a repair dock. The fifth was a fuel depot. Rivera hit 12 targets in 2 weeks, always moving, never stopping to fight a real battle. His crews worked around the clock, sleeping in shifts, eating at their stations. They knew the Caltharians would be coming for them soon. In the Caltharian capital, the High Command watched the attacks with growing anger. These humans were like insects, stinging and running away. It was beneath the dignity of the Empire to even acknowledge them. Commander Zekthral, the officer who had destroyed the Perseverance, volunteered to crush the human fleet personally. He would lead the 4th Armada, 300 ships of the line, and end this embarrassment quickly. The High Command agreed. They expected the humans to run when they saw a real armada coming. Most species did, but Rivera wasn't most species. He had spent weeks studying every record of Caltharian battles that humanity had managed to steal or buy. He knew how they thought. They were warriors who valued honor and direct combat. They formed perfect battle lines and overwhelmed enemies with superior firepower. They had won 1,000 battles using the same tactics because those tactics always worked. Rivera planned to make those tactics fail. He chose his battleground carefully. The Forge Nebula was a cloud of gas and dust left over from a supernova thousands of years ago. It was radioactive, full of debris, and played hell with sensors. The Caltharians avoided it because fighting in such chaos was dishonorable and dangerous. Rivara led the Fourth Armada right into its heart. Zek-Thrall followed confidently. His 300 ships could handle some radiation and debris. Once they caught the humans, it would be over in minutes. He formed his fleet into the traditional battlesphere, with heavy cruisers on the outside and his flagship at the center. That's when Rivera sprang his trap. The human ships had been hiding in the densest parts of the nebula, their signatures masked by the radiation. They hadn't run. They had been waiting. At Rivera's signal, all 47 ships opened fire at once from point-blank range. The Caltharians had shields designed to stop energy weapons like plasma and lasers. But humanity had always been better with kinetic weapons. Railguns that threw chunks of metal at relativistic speeds. Missiles packed with conventional explosives. Even old-fashioned tungsten rods launched from magnetic cannons. Simple weapons that hit like the fist of an angry god. The outer ring of Caltharian cruisers shattered. Their elegant shields couldn't stop solid matter moving at a fraction of light speed. Ships broke apart, atmosphere venting into space, debris adding to the chaos of the nebula. Zek-Thrall screamed orders at his fleet. They tried to return fire, but half their weapons couldn't lock onto the human ships through the interference. The humans kept moving, never staying still, using the debris field as cover. It was ugly fighting, brutal, and chaotic. Everything the Caltharians hated. Rivara's flagship, the Indomitable, led a charge straight at Zek-Thrall's command ship. The Caltharian commander laughed when he saw it coming. One human ship against his flagship. It was suicide. Then he saw the Indomitable wasn't slowing down. Rivara had already evacuated most of his crew to the other ships. He sat in the command chair with just a skeleton team, pushing the engines to maximum. The Indomitable accelerated to half the speed of light, its hull glowing from friction with the nebula gas dot at the last second. Rivera and his remaining crew jettisoned in escape pods. The Indomitable kept going. Hit Zek-Thrall's flagship like a bullet hitting an egg. The kinetic energy of the collision was equal to a small nuclear weapon. Both ships ceased to exist in a flash of light that could be seen from 3 systems away. Captain Elena Vasquez, Rivara's second in command, led the rescue boats to recover the Admiral's escape pod. She found him alive, barely floating in the wreckage with burns covering half his body. His first words when she pulled him into her ship were asking about the casualty report. They had lost 9 ships, 5,000 crew members dead. But the Fourth Armada was gone. 300 Caltharian ships reduced to scrap and bodies. The Empire had lost more ships in one battle than they had lost in the previous century. Across Caltharian space, the news spread like wildfire. The Fourth Armada, destroyed by primitive humans who fought without honor or dignity. Some in the high command wanted to dismiss it as a fluke. Others wanted to send everything they had to crush humanity immediately. The Emperor himself, Sovereign Mal-Kashir, made the decision. Humanity would be erased from existence. 6 full armadas, over 1,500 ships, would converge on human space and destroy every last human in the galaxy. No mercy, no survivors. They would be a warning to every species in the Empire about the cost of defiance. Rivara recovered in the medical bay of the Spirit of Titan, his new flagship. When Vasquez told him about the 6 armadas coming to destroy Earth, he didn't look surprised. He had expected this. "Good," he said, his voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. "Let them come for Earth. That gives us time." Vasquez didn't understand. Time for what? They had 38 ships left. They were low on ammunition and running on salvaged parts. Earth was doomed. Rivara pulled up a star map showing the Caltharian Empire. It showed 47 star systems, all connected by a network of supply lines and communication hubs. But it also showed something else. Hundreds of worlds marked as subjugated species. Entire civilizations that the Caltharians had conquered and enslaved. "We're not going back to Earth," Rivera said. "We're going to visit our new allies. They just don't know they're our allies yet." He explained his plan. The Caltharians ruled through fear and overwhelming force. But fear works both ways. If one small human fleet could destroy an entire armada, what did that say about Caltharian invincibility? And if humans could fight back, why couldn't the other species? They weren't going to win a military victory. They were going to start a revolution. Vasquez looked at the map at all those enslaved worlds and slowly smiled. It was insane. It would probably get them all killed. But it was exactly the kind of insane plan that might actually work. The human fleet jumped deeper into Caltharian space, heading not toward home but toward the heart of the Empire. They had a message to deliver, and this time it wasn't just for the Caltharians. The human fleet traveled to a world the Caltharians called Designation 742. The species that lived there called it Vrinham. They were an aquatic people who had once built ships that sailed between the stars. 800 years ago, the Caltharians had arrived and given them the same choice they gave everyone: surrender or die. The Vrin had chosen to live. Admiral Rivera didn't ask permission to enter their system. He simply appeared in orbit and started broadcasting on every frequency. His message was simple and translated into the Vrin language by the ship's computer. "My name is Marcus Rivera. I represent humanity. 40 days ago, the Caltharian Empire murdered 50,000 of my people to frighten us into surrender. We refused. We took 47 ships into their territory. We destroyed the Fourth Armada. We're still here. We're still fighting. And we will never stop." He showed them recordings of the battle in the Forge Nebula. He showed them Caltharian ships breaking apart. He showed them that the Empire could bleed dot. Then he said the words that would echo across 12 worlds. "We are 47 ships. We will never surrender." What could your people do with 47 ships? The Caltharian garrison in the system went crazy. They sent every ship they had after the humans. Rivera's fleet jumped away before the first shots were fired. But the message had already been received by millions of Vrin. 3 days later, riots broke out in the underwater cities of Vrinham. The Vrin seized control of orbital docks and stole Caltharian ships. They weren't warriors anymore. They had forgotten how to fight. But they remembered how to be free, and that was enough to start. Rivera took his fleet to another world. And another, and another. Each time, he showed them the battle. Each time, he asked the same question. Each time, he left before the Caltharians could catch him. The Dex were a crystalline species who had been enslaved for 600 years. They worked in Caltharian shipyards, building the very ships used to keep them in chains. After Rivera's visit, they started building ships with subtle flaws. Engines that would fail at critical moments. Weapons that would misfire. Shields that had weak points. The sabotage was so subtle that the Caltharians didn't notice until ships started exploding during routine operations. The Mordic were a warrior species that had fought the Caltharians to a standstill for 20 years before, finally being overwhelmed. They had been forced to serve in Caltharian armies, used as shock troops in battles. After Rivera's message reached them, they turned their weapons on their masters instead. The Empire was burning from within. Rebellions erupted on 17 worlds simultaneously. The Caltharians pulled ships from their offensive against Earth to put down the uprisings. But every ship they sent to crush one rebellion left another world vulnerable. It was like trying to put out a fire that kept spreading. Rivara's fleet was down to 23 ships now. They had been fighting for 2 months straight. Crews were exhausted. Ships were held together with spare parts and prayer. They had lost friends and family. Some of the ships were running on half power. One destroyer had no functioning weapons at all, but stayed with the fleet anyway, because nobody wanted to quit. Captain Vasquez tried to convince Rivera to take the fleet back to Earth. They had done enough. They had started the revolution. Let the other species finish it. Rivera refused. He had learned something important about the Caltharian Empire. They ruled through fear, but that fear was based on a lie. The lie was that the Caltharians were invincible, that they were everywhere, that resistance was impossible. Rivera was going to destroy that lie completely. He took his fleet on a suicide run toward the Caltharian homeworld itself. The capital system was the most heavily defended place in the Empire. Hundreds of defense platforms, thousands of automated weapons, multiple armadas stationed in permanent orbit. No enemy had gotten within a light year of it in 1,000 years. Rivara's 23 ships jumped into the outer system. Alarms screamed across the entire planet. The defense fleet scrambled, moving to intercept. They had the humans outnumbered 100 to 1. The humans didn't try to fight. They ran, jumping in random directions, leading the Caltharian ships on a chase through the system. But while half the fleet was being pursued, the other half used the confusion to slip past the defenses. Rivara's new flagship, the Remember Perseverance, appeared directly above the Imperial Palace. Every weapon on the planet locked onto it. One shot and the ship would be vaporized. Rivera opened a channel to the Emperor himself. Malkashir's face appeared on the screen, his insect-like features twisted with rage. "You dare," the Emperor hissed. "You dare come to our homeworld?" "I dare," Rivera said calmly. "I want you to understand something. We are 47 ships. We started with 47. We're down to 23. We're running out of ammunition and fuel. We're exhausted. By all rights, we should have been destroyed weeks ago." He paused, letting the Emperor process this. "But we're here, standing above your palace. If we wanted to, we could fire everything we have at this location. We wouldn't survive, but neither would you. We could end your empire in 30 seconds. The Emperor's claws clicked together nervously. "You are bluffing. You cannot penetrate our shields." "Maybe not," Rivera admitted, "but you'll never know for sure until we fire. And that's the point. You thought you could frighten humanity into surrender by killing 50,000 innocent people. You thought we would see your power and give up. Instead, you taught us that we have nothing to lose. You taught us that death is better than slavery. And now every species in your empire has learned the same lesson." Rivera fired a single missile, not at the palace but above it, a warning shot that streaked across the sky like a comet. Every person on the planet saw it. Every person in the empire who was watching the broadcast saw it. "Your empire is dying," Rivera said. "Not because we destroyed it, because you destroyed it when you forgot that power without restraint breeds resistance. Remember this day. Remember the human fleet that made you afraid in your own home. And remember that this is your fault." The Remember Perseverance jumped away a fraction of a second before the defense platforms opened fire. They had been there less than a minute, but that minute would be replayed across 1,000 worlds for generations. The Emperor sat in his throne room, shaking with rage and something he hadn't felt in centuries. Fear. Fear that maybe the humans were right. Fear that his empire was ending. Fear that he had made a terrible mistake. On Earth, the 6 Caltharian armadas that had been sent to destroy humanity suddenly received new orders. Return to the Empire. The rebellions were out of control. The capital had been threatened. The humans could wait. Rivara's fleet regrouped at the edge of Caltharian space. They had lost 6 more ships in the escape. They were down to 17. Most of them wouldn't make it back to Earth, even if they tried. But they weren't going home. Vasquez asked Rivera what they would do now. They had accomplished the impossible. Surely they had earned the right to rest. Rivera looked at the star map showing the Empire in flames. 47 species rising up against their masters. A 3,000-year-old civilization tearing itself apart. All because one small fleet refused to surrender. Now, he said quietly, we finish what we started. We stay here. We help the revolution succeed. We make sure the Caltharians can never do this to anyone else ever again. His crew looked at him. They were exhausted, broken, barely functional. But they all nodded. They had come this far. They might as well see it through to the end. The war was far from over. But the galaxy had learned something important. Humanity didn't know how to quit. 5 years after the Perseverance burned, the Caltharian Empire sent an official message to Earth. They wanted peace. They offered to leave humanity alone forever, to recognize human territory, and to never interfere with human affairs again. All they asked in return was for Admiral Rivera's fleet to stop their attacks and to stop encouraging rebellion across the Empire. The United Earth Council was ready to accept immediately. 5 years of war had been hard on humanity. The Caltharians had never invaded Earth directly, but the constant threat had changed everything. The economy had shifted to military production. Young people joined the fleet in massive numbers. Humanity had learned to be warriors because they had no choice. But before the Council could vote, they received another transmission. This one was from the Remember Perseverance, somewhere deep in former Caltharian territory. Admiral Rivera appeared on the screen. He looked older now, with more gray in his hair and deep lines in his face. Behind him, his bridge crew looked exhausted but determined. The ship itself showed signs of hard use, with exposed wiring and patched hull plates visible in the background. I've been informed of the Caltharian peace offer, Rivera said. The Council will likely ask for my opinion, so I'll give it now. My answer is no. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The Caltharians killed 50,000 people to send a message. They wanted to teach us that resistance was futile. They wanted us to be afraid. For 5 years, I've been sending a different message. I've been teaching the Empire that cruelty has consequences. That enslaving species creates enemies. That fear works both ways. Rivera pulled up a map showing what used to be the Caltharian Empire. Over half of it was now marked in different colors, representing newly independent species. 17 species have declared independence. They formed a coalition based on mutual defense and cooperation. The Vrin, who were enslaved for 800 years, now have their own fleet. The Vex are building ships for themselves and their allies. The Mordic are training defense forces for smaller species who can't protect themselves. They're creating something better than an empire. They're creating a community. He looked directly into the camera. The Caltharians want peace because they're losing. They want us to stop because we're winning. They're asking us to forget what they did because it's convenient for them now. But my daughter is still dead. Those 50,000 people are still dead. And millions of beings across dozens of worlds suffered under Caltharian rule for centuries. Rivera's voice grew harder. So no, I will not stop. My fleet will continue to operate in this region. We will continue to train rebels. We will continue to share military technology with the coalition. And we will make damn sure the Caltharians never have the strength to do this to anyone else ever again. The transmission ended. The Council debated for 3 days. Some argued that Rivera was disobeying orders and should be court-martialed. Others argued he was a hero who had saved Earth from invasion. In the end, they made a compromise. Officially, Admiral Rivera was declared absent without leave. and Earth accepted the peace treaty with the Caltharians. Unofficially, supply ships kept finding their way to Rivara's fleet, and retired military officers kept volunteering to travel to the coalition worlds to serve as advisors. Rivara's fleet never came home. They became something new, something the galaxy had never seen before, a permanent peacekeeping force that answered to no single government. The Remember Perseverance and its sister ships patrolled the border of what used to be the Caltharian Empire, making sure the former slave masters stayed in their home system. Other species started sending their own ships to join Rivara's fleet. The Vryn sent 3 cruisers. The Vex built 2 frigates specifically to serve alongside the humans. The Mordic sent their best warriors. Within 2 years, the independent fleet numbered over 100 ships from a dozen species, all united by a single principle: never again. Rivara trained a new generation of officers from all the coalition species. He taught them human military tactics and the importance of adaptability. He taught them that honor was meaningless if it came at the cost of survival. Most importantly, he taught them that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak, not exploit them. On the Caltharian homeworld, the Empire tried to rebuild. They were confined to their home system now, their vast territories lost, their subject species free. Young Caltharians grew up hearing stories about the human fleet that destroyed their empire. Some hated humanity for it. Others wondered if maybe their ancestors had deserved what happened. One of those young Caltharians was a diplomat named Kirith. She had been born the same year the Perseverance was destroyed. She grew up in an empire that was falling apart, watching her people struggle with the consequences of their own cruelty. When she was old enough, she joined the new Caltharian diplomatic corps, one of the few who believed in reconciliation rather than revenge. Her first assignment was to travel to Earth and visit the memorial to the mission rather than revenge. Her first assignment was to travel to Earth and visit the memorial to the reconciliation rather than revenge. Perseverance. The memorial was a simple thing. A black wall with 50,000 names carved into it, one for each person who died. At the base of the wall, people had left flowers, letters, and small tokens. Kirith stood before it for a long time, reading the names, thinking about what her people had done. She had brought a crystal flower, a traditional Caltharian symbol of apology. She placed it at the base of the memorial and whispered words she had been practicing for months. We remember. We all remember. And we will never forget what one human fleet taught an empire about the cost of cruelty. An old woman standing nearby heard her and approached. She introduced herself as Elena Vasquez, former captain in the United Earth Fleet. She had served with Rivara until an injury forced her to retire. Now she volunteered at the memorial, helping visitors and maintaining the site. Kirith asked if Vasquez hated the Caltharians for what they did. The old captain thought about it for a moment. I hate what your empire did, Vasquez said carefully. I lost friends when the Perseverance burned. I lost more friends fighting in Rivara's fleet. But you weren't born yet when it happened. You didn't make those choices. And from what I understand, your generation is trying to do better. She gestured to the wall of names. The Admiral used to say that we weren't fighting for revenge. We were fighting so this would never happen again to anyone. If the Caltharian Empire had to fall for that to happen, then it was worth it. If your generation learns from what happened, then maybe all those deaths meant something. Kirith stayed at the memorial for hours, talking with Vasquez about the war, about the revolution, about what came after. When she finally left, she carried with her a deeper understanding of what her people had lost and why they had lost it. Years passed. Admiral Marcus Rivara never returned to Earth. He stayed with his fleet, patrolling the borders, training new crews, and making sure the peace held. He became a legend across 24 species, the ghost of Earth, the Admiral who broke an empire, The man who taught the galaxy that some people would rather die standing than live kneeling. He died quietly in his sleep at the age of 78, still aboard the Remember Perseverance. His crew buried him in space, in the same system where his daughter had died. Ships from 17 species came to the funeral. Even a Caltharian diplomatic vessel attended, carrying young officers who had grown up in the new empire and wanted to pay their respects to the man who had changed everything. The Remember Perseverance continued its mission under a new commander. The fleet kept patrolling. The coalition grew stronger. And every year on the anniversary of the Perseverance's destruction, people across the galaxy paused to remember 50,000 innocent people who died, and the 47 ships that made sure their deaths meant something. The Caltharian Empire never recovered. They remained confined to their home system, a shadow of what they once were. Their young people grew up hearing about the old empire's glory, but also about its cruelty and the price they paid for it. Some still dreamed of reconquest. Most just wanted to live in peace. On Earth, children learned about Admiral Rivera in their history classes. They learned about the Perseverance and the 47 ships and the revolution that freed dozens of worlds. They learned that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their tactics or their weapons. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat, their willingness to stand up for what was right no matter the cost, and their ability to inspire others to fight for their own freedom. The galaxy had learned an important lesson, paid for in blood and sacrifice, that empires built on fear and cruelty will always fall eventually, because someone will always refuse to kneel. Sometimes it only takes one fleet, 47 ships, and a man who loved his daughter enough to make sure her death meant something. The Caltharians would regret Earth forever, but more importantly, they would remember. They would all remember